So I will start by saying this. I recently was at a conference and there was a lot of CISOs and CIOs, and the main thing that they were talking about was governance of agents and making sure that if they're going to be using agents, whether it's with MCP or not, they want to be able to track and audit and know that these agents aren't going off the rails. Or if there's like an agent that doesn't execute its task, but it still does stuff, how can they go back and still account for what it did at an enterprise level? And that just seemed like such a headache to me.
There's like two Alexes, right? Like, I've got startup founder Alex over here, and then I've got like enterprise Alex over here. And startup Alex is like groaning. He's like, "Oh God!" Like the word governance just like makes every cell in my body just like ah.
Yeah.
It is probably it's like one of those words. It's like there's the word enterprise grade that is like the first clue that like you've sold out to the man, and then right beneath it is like governance, right?
Yes.
And so it's hard, right? Like as a founder, as an early stage startup person, it's like, man, like what? Like, are we really going to waste our time on this? But then the enterprise side of Alex is like, that makes perfect sense, right? Like makes perfect sense. And so let's talk about, those two
The
different voices,
angel and the devil on your
the
shoulders.
devil, and you can decide which one's which, right? But like, let's talk about like that dichotomy. And so let's talk about like, let's understand the enterprise first. So if you think of a CISO or a CIO, what is their job, right? Their job is to navigate their organization forward on technology because that's how they stay competitive, either by driving additional growth or reducing cost or efficiencies or whatnot. But it's a critical function. It's one of the most important, those are most like some of the most important roles in an organization. But they have to do it in a way where the wheels aren't going to fall off. And and it's a very different problem statement at that scale because man, you've got hundreds of different or thousands of different people. I think like you look at one of the major banks, like half the organization are like IT and software engineers, and so there's a lot of things happening, and there's no way you can see all of it. And so the only way that you can create any semblance of control or risk mitigation or predictability is to start to standardize things, to start to have governance.
Yeah.
And so as the organization is, as you're watching CEOs and CIOs and CTOs commit really big bucks to AI investments, in particular agentic investments, everybody knows that that stuff comes with risks. And because AI hallucinates, AI can make up all kinds of stuff.
It can
AI
do
can have
stuff.
biases. There's
Yeah.
all these different things that come with the tech that isn't perfect. That brings risk. Now, nobody wants to get in the way of the technology because they all know that the return on investment is worth it, but they also have to do their job and mitigate the risks. And so when people talk about governance, at least in our world around tool use and tool usage and MCP and things like that, they want to know like what is the agent doing, right? Like if I'm giving
Exactly.
it access to all these different systems, how do I know that it did the right thing at the right time on behalf of the right person? And if it did the wrong thing, how do I trace it back? How do I remediate it? How do I exact controls? How do I stop it from doing things that it shouldn't be doing in the moment in real time and not catch it afterwards? And that stuff's all pretty reasonable. It just has a jargony name called
Hmm.
governance. And in agents, it's particularly critical at the tool use layer because that's where all the action happens. Like, I give an example. I told a bank this. I'm like, look, you've got 10,000 employees, and you don't really care how many of them fantasize about robbing the bank. Like nobody, it's not an issue. Like you only care the moment somebody like tries to do it. and and so the same is true for an agent. Like the large language model can hallucinate all day long about transferring money from point A to point B when it shouldn't. But you really only care when it attempts to make that wire transfer.
Mm.
And that event, like that delineation, is the tool use. It's the function call. It's the invocation of the MCP server. And so that is one of the best places to inject governance. That's also a really nice place to inject governance because that's the deterministic part of the system. And so if you try and inject governance, you know, at the model level, that's harder because you're
Yeah.
in the non-determinism. But the tool execution layer, that's highly deterministic. That's actually the point of that layer is to be deterministic. And so you can
That's
do a
such a good
lot of
point.
really tight controls that don't get in the way of the agent's reasoning and don't require a PhD trying to figure out like how to, fine tune train or have circuit breakers in the model. It's very, very simple.
And at the model level, you're never going to be able to get 100% anything. So why try and do that? That the best research out there is not going to get you to that point. I
Yeah.
look at it a little bit like the enterprises that have the data governance or just the governance role in themselves, they're companies that have to protect something. Like you don't get a governance role if you're a startup that's just trying to move at 1,000 miles an hour, right? It's once you have established yourself and you now have something to lose, it's like more important that you don't lose what you have or you don't smear the whole brand than it is to create a new product that is innovative.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. Like you need to have something to lose. And and when you're a large enterprise and you've got over $1 billion in revenue, you've got a lot to lose.
A lot.
Now let's go on the other side, right? The founder, right? The
Yeah.
earlier
Yeah.
stage, Silicon Valley startup that's like groaning and like, you're breaking innovation, and I'm over here disrupting,
Yeah.
and yeah, like that person's right too. You know, governance, compliance, controls, all of that stuff is objectively a distraction to innovation. It adds red tape. Dare I say bureaucracy. It adds dependencies. It adds all kinds of things to just slow everything down. Anyone who's ever gone through a SOC 2 or a CASA audit
Ooh.
knows this stuff sucks, right? Nobody wants to do it, and it is a tax on the business. And when you're trying to run 1,000,000 miles an hour, especially in the AI space, it is so it is so frustrating to hit these speed bumps, and it is so easy to shake your fist and be like, "You're getting in the way of my innovation." But similarly, that stuff only matters once you've built something that anyone gives a shit about, right? Like, because now you have something to lose. And now suddenly you're selling into a customer set that also has something to lose. And so it is like one of those rites of passage as an early stage founder to find yourself shaking your fist at all of this, compliance and governance work, because it means that you have at least taken a few steps towards quote unquote making it,
Uh-huh.
because the world now cares enough to ask if you've got a SOC 2 or if you've got any kind of governance on your agents' actions and things like that. No, nobody asks when nobody cares.
That, that is such a good point. Yeah, if you're irrelevant, completely irrelevant, you can bang on the drum about
Right.
governance all you want. Nobody's going to
Yeah.
be caring.
Yeah. Right.
The other thing that I was thinking about that has come to my mind recently, and I would love to get your thoughts on, is how there's not really a secure way, or we don't have like any kind of protocol for passing off context from one agent to another. And I realized this with PII, and PII is very sensitive data. If that's in the prompt and then it goes through like a lot of different agentic pass offs or handoffs, whatever you want to call them, and then it's getting summarized, like that accordion thing is happening where it gets compressed and then it gets expanded on and then compressed. And at some point, you lose what is the PII, what is actually important. And there's not really like a way to staple something, whether it is absolutely the most sensitive or it's just something that I would prefer not to like have models seeing. You can't just kind of like blind that out. And the other piece to this is like, by doing that, you're creating this trade off that if I do want to blind something out, let's imagine a world where I do say, yeah, all right, cool. I have this ability to just kind of like cloak or mask certain parts of the prompt that I feel are sensitive. You now have to decide, well, do I am I okay with taking a hit on my accuracy or on the ability for this agent to do what it needs to do because a few parts of the prompt are masked out?
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's like I wish I had a clean answer for you. Maybe I'll take it up a level and then come down. So the heart of the problem is that we've just completely changed the paradigm of how software is built. And what I mean by that is if you look at most software that most software developers have been building since, I don't know, the 60s and 70s, it's deterministic software, right? If it's and gates and or gates, right? It's if else checks. It's a flow diagram that's, and the little diamond in the flow diagram is, an if else check that a developer wrote and it's been tested and it's gone through unit tests and integration tests. And it takes the same answer every time and outputs the same exact response every time. And that's just the way we wrote software. And all of the tools, all the techniques, all of the test infrastructure, all of our governance systems, all are predicated on this being deterministic. If I give you, the same input every single time, I'm going to get the same exact output every single time. And then we introduced models. We introduced non-determinism. We introduced a system that's stochastic or probabilistic or whatever word is easiest to wrap your head around. And for the majority of software development field, that's a radical change. How do you test it? Integration test is kind of useless, right? A unit test doesn't get at it. Now you got to learn evals, and well, man, like that. How am I going to do that in my CI/CD pipeline? That's really expensive and that's really slow, and I don't even know how to write evals, and like that's just one problem. Like this suddenly, how do you do an authentication flow? Like so many things that had become rote and had become things you just didn't think about are now all up in the air, and everybody's trying to figure it out together. And one of them is how the hell do you handle PII? Now, you can sign agreements with large language models saying they're not going to train on your data. That's great. That's a first step. Go make sure you're a paying customer. But beyond that, there's a lot of other concerns, and it's early. Now, I can tell you what we're seeing in the field. What we're seeing in the field, a number of people just straight up aren't building for PII. They're saying, you know what? We're not going to take the risk. This system is not designed for PII. And so, Mr. Customer or Mr. End User, if you're going to just know this is not designed for PII, so please don't give me PII. But if you do, like that was on you, right? Because we gave you in the terms of service, we don't take PII and all that fun stuff. And I think that's what we're seeing a fair bit of. The business jargon is these are low risk agents. People are designing right now mostly low risk agents, but the economic pressure is driving people to build higher risk agents because those are the ones that are going to have the most impact. They're going to have the most return on investment if they can figure out how to get it right. And so then you're starting to see people say, okay, well, I'm going to have PII flow through this. How do I we see this in our system. Like we have a secrets management part of our product. And it's interesting because it was originally designed for API keys and database connection strings, which are probably the most sensitive things that our system is going to see.
Yeah.
And so people use that, and so they put data in there. It could be full of we've seen phone numbers, we've seen social security numbers, we've seen credit card numbers go into our secrets management system, which is very novel use of it. It wasn't the original intention, but it's been cool to watch.
Nice.
And then they'll pump it in there. The model will never see it, and then those things get used at the tool calling layer because that's the only reason you even need it. And so the model will have a handle. They'll have a label for it. And then when they pass that, we'll call it at the tool use layer.
Nice.
And so that's a way of I'm almost hesitant to use this word because it's so loaded, but it's like a way of tokenizing this stuff, right? all the security wonks are gonna be like, well, that's not exactly what tokenization means, and all the LLM guys are like, what do you mean a token? That's different. But it's like a way of creating like an alias that the model can see and the model can play with, but still have it be usable at the point of action. But there's a lot more coming as the field gets smarter in this. I know we're building more things. I know other people are building a lot of other things. So I think in 24 months, I think we'll have a pretty good paradigm for how to work with different kinds of PII. But it's early.
Yeah, and I was wondering if it should be on the MCP level, or if it should be a new protocol, or if it should just be a tool like Arcade that decides we're going to do this for you and make sure that your data is safe there. But that is a fascinating one. 100%. Like, I was given a talk last week and I said, we're in the T9 era. We have so many more iterations to go before we get to like touchscreen. We still got to get to the BlackBerry. We haven't even hit the BlackBerry yet, and we're expecting like touchscreen types experiences. So it is early days. Speaking of early days, though, I know that you've been looking at MCP like basically every day, all day, and there's some things that you saw, right? That it was like, wait, where's all the resources on this? Where's all the uses? What's going on here?
Yeah, yeah, it's been a really fascinating journey. So let me first like put the public disclosure right. We are all in on MCP, and so before I start to like comment, I don't want this to seem like I'm like trashing MCP or anything like that.
Yeah,
We're
we're
all
not
in.
going to clip out of context.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
make
Not clip
sure
out of
to.
context. Like Alex said, no, like MCP, like we are deliriously happy that MCP is having its moment because like the industry needs a standard. Um, for this stuff. Everybody benefits. We benefit. You benefit. Everybody wins. And it's great that it's being driven by all the biggest vendors, right? Like everybody's on board, or almost everybody's on board. Uh, some notable exceptions, but so that's great. But like the biggest problem that MCP has is it doesn't have a time machine. like, like everybody, the demand for MCP or the demand for the promise of MCP that suddenly like I can just connect my AI agent to anything and it'll all magically work and it'll be secure and it'll be performant and blah 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 like has been so extreme that the biggest headwind to MCP is actually customer expectations.
Uh,
and and that's been causing a ton of problems, in my opinion. And so if you like, just look at a calendar. For most people, even in AI, the first time they even heard about MCP was maybe January, right? If you weren't working with coding agents, you probably didn't even hear about MCP until like maybe March. Um, Even today, you look at the number of MCP clients that are out there, the number of like AI systems that you can easily plug your MCP into. It is largely and almost exclusively coding agents. Claude Desktop, I think, is like a shining notable exception. Um, you can barely do it with ChatGPT. Like it's funky with ChatGPT. It's almost designed for you not to use it.
Interesting.
And
Yeah, because they
Perplexity makes you
advertise.
download something. What was that?
They advertise that they are. It's like, oh yeah, OpenAI, we've gone in on MCP.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what's happening inside those four walls. I get the feeling that they are investing, but it's not been. It doesn't feel like it's been the top priority. I think it's still SSC based. You have to go into developer mode. It only works in deep research, and so, but they're not alone. To be fair, right? Like there aren't many agents that you can just plug MCPs into, and and so for the majority of the community, they're really just designed for coding agents. Now, the world of developers building MCPs is extraordinary, but the world of consumption of MCPs is far, far more limited.
Fascinating.
And so the question is, well, why? Well, part of it is just the maturity of the spec. And so as of today, October 3rd of 2025, you still can't do multi-user MCP service for many things at all. And so you still can't really enforce authorization down to the tool level of like you can't even like really manage the can this user can this agent on behalf of this user perform this action. Like that's still rocket science. Then and now that's one that's near and dear to our heart because that's ultimately what we bring to the table, and that's why our customers use us. We solve that, and we've also been contributors to MCP to try and add that functionality to the spec. So it's coming, but it's still not out today, right?
And
And
so
it's not.
what is the common pattern now instead of being able to separate it?
Yeah, the common pattern right now is use a service account, right? You give the agent its own identity and its own permissions, and that's not really going to work in production. People call that a service account. Encoding agents is not that big of a deal because it's a user, it's a single user, and so the service account is you, uh, which is why very few people in coding agents complain. But when you try and build something that's going to be multi-user, this becomes a huge problem. And so let's say you're building a support bot. You build MCPs to go do a bunch of knowledge, RAG or whatever. You can ask all kinds of public questions about, hey, why is my product not working and all this stuff. And that's easy. That's all like it's working off public information. But the moment you ask it where your order is, you run into a really big problem because how do you know that 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 the agent's allowed to see my order? And even if it is, how do you assert that I'm allowed to see my order? How do I know that I'm asking about my order and not your order? And so I can't prompt it to give me your order information. And
Man.
and so that problem is not yet really well solved for the majority of use cases. I mean, there are hacks to get at it, but there's no like the real solution has been accepted into the MCP spec, but has not yet been released. It's called out of band elicitation for those of you who are really nerdy. It's coming, but it's not out yet. Now that's not a fault of anyone on the MCP like committee, like, or the steering committee. There's nobody to shake your fist at. Like this thing is just that early. Like it's only been around. It hasn't been around a year yet for most people. And as in an HTTP, like for HTTP MCP, which is what the market really wants, and that's for sure not even a year old. And so like that's a big problem. Now that thankfully plug for Arcade, this is what we solve. And so most of our customers are coming to us to go help them get this right. And we do. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of demand for MCP. We are starting to see, tool execution and tool use and MCP starting to make its way into production. But it's still pretty difficult if you're not using a service like ours at the moment. And we hope that over time the bar is going to start dropping and making it easier for everybody. But it's still hard mainly because it's early.
Yeah. It's fascinating you talk about the supply side having a ton more than what you're seeing in a way. Like the demand side is there, but it's almost latent demand. So there's a few bumps that we got to hop over or hurdles we have to jump before we really take use or make use of the large supplies.
I've never seen anything. I've never seen a supply issue like that in my life. It's fascinating to watch.
It is. It's going to be cool. I appreciate these catch ups for this very reason because we get to chat about, it's like we both go and do our own thing. And then we get to come back and be like, what'd you see out there? Oh, yeah, I've been seeing this. And so I learned a ton from you, Alex. This has been awesome, man.
All right, thank you, man. Thank you so much. And dude, enjoy Greece.
Thanks, dude.